Hi everybody and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, my name is Leah and most of my videos are focused on unsolved crimes and mysteries. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. You know I'm always happy to see you. So today we're going to be talking about Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK Strangler. I'm not going to go over the full story all the way back from 1974. I'm going to start in 2005, where he made the biggest mistake in 30 years that ended up getting him arrested. And he was sentenced to 10 life sentences for 10 first-degree murders. And that should be the end of story. Case closed. No, it's not. Since Dennis Rader was sent to prison, law enforcement has been working on a lot of cold cases all the way back from the 70s, and they have a full list of possible victims that could be linked to the BTK Strangler. So we're going to be talking about that today, and of course, as usual, I'm going to share my thoughts, my opinions, and of course I also have questions. So if you're ready, let's do this. In 2004, the Wichita Eagle did an article in the local newspaper about the 30-year anniversary on the Otero family murders that happened in 1974. The BTK Strangler had been quiet for almost 25 years, and everybody actually thought that he might have passed away. But when Dennis Rader saw that article, he just couldn't resist. He was getting bored after 25 years and he wanted that attention again. He started sending letters to the local newspaper and to the police with clues that would tell them where they could find packages that he had left in different locations all over town. In those packages, they would find Barbie dolls that was tied up in different positions representing his prior victims. Dennis Rader, he loved taunting the police and leaving the public terrified. And after several months of playing this cat and mouse game with the police, he started to get brave and wanted to take it one step further. So he put an ad in the local newspaper asking the police if it would be safe for him to send a floppy disk and asked them if they would be able to trace him. The police wrote him back in an ad that it would be okay. So the 16th of February 2005, Dennis Rader sent them a floppy disk. Of course, the police had it analyzed and checked by experts, and the disk had deleted documents on it. So they traced the metadata back to the Christ Lutheran Church, where it had been saved on a computer under the name Dennis. And when they checked up on who was working at that church, they found out that the president of the church was Dennis Rader. They checked up on his background and his family and found out where he lived. They were following him for days. They didn't want to make any mistakes because this was a serial killer they had been trying to catch for 30 years. And they wanted to be absolutely 100% sure they had the right guy. So they needed his DNA to compare it with the DNA they had found at all the crime scenes. But how would they get his DNA without Dennis Rader finding out that they were onto him? They checked up on Dennis Rader and his family's medical records and found out that his daughter was in the doctor's office on a regular basis doing some special tests that would leave her DNA in her medical records. So they went to her doctor and got her medical record and tested her DNA against the DNA that they had found at the crime scenes using genealogy, and it was a perfect match. The 25th of February 2005, Dennis Rader was on his way home to have lunch with his wife when he suddenly noticed a lot of helicopters flying above him, and before he knew it, he was surrounded by police cars. They ran to his car and pulled him out while asking him if he knew why he was being arrested. And his reply was so calm and cool, and he just said, "Oh, I think I know why." And when being put on the ground, he just looked at the officer very calmly and said, "Will you please let my wife know that I won't be home for lunch?" A press conference was held by the law enforcement, and everybody in the public were holding their breath, probably terrified of hearing that the BTK killer had committed another murder. But instead, they were told the BTK strangler has been arrested. People were clapping, smiling, hugging each other, and others they broke down crying out of relief. After 30 years of living in fear, checking under their bed, behind the shower curtains, inside closets, checking for a dial tone on their phone, they knew that they could finally feel safe inside their own home again.
We begin tonight with breaking news in the case.
BTK is arrested.
In the meantime, the police and the FBI was all over Dennis Rader's house in Park City. Inside the house, they found several hiding holes in the attic, under his wardrobe, the crawl space under his house, and in the backyard. They also found a hiding hole inside the treehouse that he had built for his children. And what they found shocked them to the core. They found ropes, handcuffs, chains, gag balls, masks, wigs, shoes, clothes and underwear that he had stolen from his victims, about 200 Polaroid pictures of his victims tied up, and selfies of himself dressed up and tied up as he did to his victims. He also had drawings that he had made of the victims, documents, newspaper clippings of the BTK, notebooks, journals. He kept journals of all of his victims, explaining how he chose them, how he stalked them to learn their routines, how he broke into their home, what he did to them, and how he felt doing it. There was maps of the victims' locations. There was maps of all his hiding holes. There was a box full of souvenirs, jewelry, car keys, driver's license, ID cards. There was a lot. Dennis Rader's court hearing started on August 17, 2005. Dennis Rader had already pled guilty to all 10 murders. The police and agents involved in the case gave their testimony, explaining every single gruesome detail about the murders, the crime scene, and the evidence to the judge. After that, the judge asked Dennis Rader to explain the murders and explain how he chose his victims and what he did to them. Dennis was very open and honest, and he had no problem explaining all the details. It was almost like he was proud. While all the details of the victims and their murders was explained in detail, all the victims' families were present and heard everything that was done to their loved ones. The day after, the 18th of August 2005, all the family members of the victims got a chance to speak, and they all explained how the gruesome murders of their loved ones had affected their lives. It was absolutely heartbreaking to listen to. The judge then asked Dennis Rader if he had something to say, and he did. And I couldn't believe it. He apologized to everyone, and he complimented the state and the law enforcement for their hard work. Then he mentioned every single victim and shared shortly and very briefly who they were as a person and what life they led. Then he held a thank you speech for everyone that had been working on his case and everyone that helped him in the case, and a thank you to all the officers. In his final words, he did apologize to the victims' families. Dennis Rader was sentenced to 10 life sentences with no chance of parole. He is now imprisoned in El Dorado Correctional Facility. Everybody probably thought this was the end of the BTK strangler. He was in prison, case closed. But no. It has taken law enforcement years and years to go through all the notebooks, maps, and journals found in Dennis Rader's house. Because Dennis had created a lot of codes in his writings and they wanted them to be broken. A few examples would be like PJ would stand for project. After the PJ, he would pick a word to remember the victims by. So it would be like PJ for project and then armchair. PJ armchair or PJ moonlight followed by a description of the murder. C1 would stand for chapter 1, so C2 would be chapter 2. He would also taunt the police by sending them letters with clues hidden in puzzles mixed with numbers. He liked feeling like the smartest person in the room. The Osage County Sheriff, Eddie Virden, I hope I pronounced that right, and his team started looking into old cold cases, all the way back to the 70s. They wanted to see if any of them could be linked to Dennis Rader. And they did find a cold case dated all the way back to the 23rd of June 1976. It was a 16-year-old cheerleader by the name Cynthia Kinney who went missing after leaving a laundromat in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. She has never been found. There was a bank across the street from the laundromat that had some kind of security work done, and it is believed that Dennis Rader was working for that company at the time that she went missing. They looked into Dennis Rader's journals and found a victim that he had named PJ Bad Laundry Day. They found another cold case, 22-year-old Shauna Beth Garber. She was found murdered in December 1990 in McDonald County, Missouri. Her autopsy revealed that she had been raped, strangled, and restrained with different bindings. For decades, she was known as Grace Doe because nobody knew who she was until she was identified in 2021 with genetic genealogy. Denise Radburn also went missing from a laundromat, and she was found murdered. Up until now, they have 5 cold cases that they are working very hard on, and 2 of them has not been revealed to the public yet because, as they say, it's very sensitive cases. Carrie Rawson, Dennis Rader's daughter, had been quiet for many, many years while she suffered severe PTSD and trauma. She has been in trauma therapy for years, just fighting to get her life back and regain her identity so she will no longer be known as the serial killer's daughter, but she is Carrie Rawson. When she heard about the cold cases and realized her dad might have heard more than the 10 victims that he was in prison for, she found her inner strength and decided that she wanted to help law enforcement in any way that she could. She sat down with investigators and saw most of the Polaroid pictures of the victims and the selfies of her dad dressed in the victim's clothes, and once again she was shocked. She used to go on fishing trips with her dad, and he would teach her how to fillet a fish with a knife. She saw that knife on the pictures and realized it was the same knife he had used on his victims. He even taught Carrie how to shoot a gun. And she saw a picture with that gun and realized it was the same gun that he had used on his victims. She also saw a crime scene photo, and on that photo she saw a blanket that she recognized. It was the same blanket they took with them when they went camping as a family. She had been sleeping with that blanket and he would wrap it around her to keep her warm. And now she knows that her dad most likely killed a woman on this blanket. After Carrie looked at all the maps, documents, locations, and victims, she was convinced that her dad had taken her to some of the crime scenes. They went on many trips and holidays as a family, and he would show the family different locations that he really liked and other places that he would love to live in after he retired. So investigators, they took her on several trips so she could try to find all the locations leaning on her memory. They marked the locations that she showed them on a map and would plan to do some digging there. She really wanted to help the victim's family to find peace and closure. She had a no contact and protection order against her dad, and she had not seen him in 18 years. So she decided to contact the governor to get that order lifted. She wanted to see if she could make him confess or give her some information about Cynthia Kinney and Shana Garber. She succeeded and the no contact order was lifted and she went to El Dorado Correctional Facility with a full team of investigators. When they arrived to El Dorado Correctional Facility, she was told to leave all her belongings in a locker. Carrie and two armed investigators went through all the locked doors, and she could feel the anxiety and the stress build up in her body. So she told the investigators she needed a few minutes alone. So she went to the restroom and took a really deep breath, and when she came back out, they were taken to a very big room. There were two chairs lined up against the wall for the two investigators to sit on, and in the middle of the room there was a table and two chairs for Dennis Rader and Carrie. Carrie had been warned about her dad's health. He was 78 years old now, and his health is not doing very well. So his appearance has changed a lot since she last saw him 18 years ago. She was sitting at the table with a notebook, just waiting. And all of a sudden the doors opened and her dad, Dennis Rader, was brought in a wheelchair. He had lost all his teeth and lost about 9 inches. He used to be 5'11", but now he was only 5'2". He had scoliosis and both his legs were wrapped. Carrie described it very specifically and said that it looked like her dad's body was rotting from the inside out. Dennis Rader didn't recognize his daughter Carrie to begin with because his eyesight had gone very bad. But when he realized that his daughter was right in front of him after 18 years, he broke down and started crying. Carrie hugged her dad and they had a father-daughter reunion. They spoke about the good old days and talked about all the memories that they shared. But Carrie knew they only had about 90 minutes, so she kept looking at the time. She needed answers about Cynthia Kinney and Shana Garber. After a while, she said, "Dad, I'm here because I have to ask you something." She looked at her dad and said, "What do you think happened to Shana Garber?" And as soon as she asked him that question about a victim, her happy, caring, loving father was gone. He cubed right in front of her, and for the first time in her life, she was face to face with the BTK strangler. She said that even though he's 78 years old, he's very sharp and very fast. She could hardly keep up with her notes. And she knew everything was being recorded by the facility, but she also took notes of everything she observed. She then asked him if there was more than 10 victims. He looked at her and said nothing, probably because he knew they were being recorded. He lifted one finger that indicated the number 1, and with the other hand, he made a circle with his finger, and that circle just kept going and kept going in circles, indicating that there was a lot more than 10 victims. Carrie also asked him about another unsolved murder. It was in 1977 that 26-year-old Denise Radburn was leaving a laundromat and went missing. She was found murdered. He looked at her and said nothing, but she got permission to hand him some paper, and he drew her a map with locations of barns and creeks. He was very sharp and knows the names of all creeks in Kansas. Carrie explained that her dad raised her to do this. She said, "He taught me cryptograms. He taught me logic puzzles. He taught me everything he knew about true crime. He taught everything to me. But he's up against me now. He raised me to go catch him, so that's what I'm gonna do." Dennis Rader denies having any connection to the unsolved cold cases, but it could be because the cases, they could be reopened, and if he's convicted for the murders, he could face the death penalty. It could also be because he has the attention again from the local media and law enforcement and his daughter as well. And it's known that Dennis Rader, he loved the attention and the game of cat and mouse. The Osage County Sheriff also decided to go visit Dennis Rader in prison. Without mentioning any of the cold cases, he said that Dennis Rader started explaining about his 10 murders all over again in every single detail. And when the time was up and the sheriff was about to leave, Dennis Rader told him that he only had one fantasy left, and that was the one that he never managed to pull off. And it would be kidnapping a girl from a laundromat. In 2005, Dennis Rader's house was sold to the city, and in 2007 they decided to bulldoze the house to make an entry to a nearby park. The house was torn down and removed, and when they started removing the pavement leading up to the house, they found a pair of pantyhose full of knots. They were handed over to the Osage County Sheriff, and he went to the property and stopped the workers from digging any further. Investigators was called in, and they brought shovels and metal detectors. Slowly, more and more items started to surface. They kept searching and realized they had found 2 more hiding holes that belonged to Dennis Rader. They found more bondage equipment, chains, and a C-clip that controls the length of the chain. They also found items that clearly belonged to an elder woman, and items belonging to a younger female. The details of the items has not been made public yet. All the items are being handled very, very carefully because they are hoping to find DNA evidence on them that can connect the items to the cold case victims. This investigation is still ongoing. The cold case task force is working on these cases on a daily basis, and it's a lot of work. They're still working on breaking codes that Dennis Rader made in his letters and journals with the help from Carrie. They're looking at a long list of potential BTK victims. They're checking the manner and the cause of death. They're comparing crime scene photos and locations with Dennis Rader's journals, pictures, maps, and locations. In the meantime, they have experts analyzing and trying to collect DNA from all the items they found in the hiding holes to find out who these items belong to. All we can do now is let the law enforcement and experts do what they do best. I hope and pray that the victims' families will get some answers that will give them some peace and closure. So the first thing I want to mention is the murders of 4 family members in the Otero family. Dennis Rader explained that he was driving his wife to work one morning and he saw Julie Otero walking with her daughter. And he decided right then and there that they were going to be his first victims. So he started stalking the family, and one morning he broke into their house, killing 4 members of the family. It was the husband, the wife, an 11-year-old girl, and a 9-year-old boy. That was his first murders. Do you really believe that? Seriously? I don't think it's easy taking someone's life, and when it's your first time murdering someone, do you really think he would start off by killing 4 people at once? It would be a lot of people to control. You would have no idea how the husband would react, the wife. I don't think the Otero family is his first victims. No chance. There's no chance that you go out and take someone's life for the first time ever and then start out by taking the life of 4 people at once. I don't believe that. I think he did it before. There's victims prior to the Otero family. I really believe that. Then I want to talk about his letters that he sent to the local newspaper and to the police. Dennis Rader was very, very, very careful, not leaving his fingerprints, no hairs, no fiber, no nothing on those letters. He was actually so careful that he wrote the letter, went to the library, and made copies of these letters to be 100% sure not to leave his fingerprints, hair or fibers. But when he went to his crime scenes, his DNA was everywhere. His semen was there. His fingerprints, hair, everything would be there. So why are you so careful about the letters not leaving your fingerprints? It doesn't make sense to me. In my logic thinking mind, it would be the other way around. I wouldn't be so careful with the letters. Do you know what I mean? It's just a letter. But I would be so careful at the crime scene not leaving anything there that could link anything back to me. But he did it the other way around. He was careful with the letters, but not at the crime scene. It doesn't make sense to me at all. Is that because as Dennis Rader, he could think normal, but when he cubed and became the BTK, he didn't care about anything. Like 2 different personalities. Does it make sense to you? It doesn't make sense to me. The cubing thing does make sense. So when he's Dennis Rader writing those letters, he would think twice and he would be very careful. But when he cubed and turned into the BTK strangler, he was a completely different person. Maybe he didn't care. He didn't care about anything. He just did what he did. What do you think? And then there's something else I've been thinking about as well that in some way doesn't make sense to me as well. I read the stories of all 10 victims, and some of them, they put up a really big fight and struggle. He was fighting with some of them. And I can't help think, didn't he get any scratches in his face or bruises or Some of these victims were men, and they attacked him, punching him. The women attacked him and was trying to fight him off. Wouldn't they have been scratching him and everything? There must have been some bruises on him or some scratches, because he was not just fighting women, he was fighting men as well. And these people were not just fighting with him, they were fighting for their life. So they would have been punching, slapping, scratching, kicking. Didn't he get any bruises or some deep cuts or scratches or something? It doesn't say anything about that. Nothing. And I'm not just thinking about his family. I'm thinking his job, his neighbors, his friends, Boy Scout camp, the parents, his family. Didn't anyone see any bruises on him? And what about when he restrained himself with a lot of bindings? When we see victims in true crime that's been put in handcuffs or have been tied up or something, they have bruises around their wrists. And some of the ropes on him, he tied them really tight. I think it's weird that he didn't have any bruises at all. Very strange. And now I want to talk to you about his wife. I think she's really lucky that he didn't hurt her as well. And she's very lucky she got out alive. And the reason I'm saying that, I'm sorry, I know it sounds horrible and really scary, but there's a reason why I'm saying this. When Carrie went to see him in prison to get information about the cold case victims, he was her father. He was Dennis Rader, the dad, her father. And he was so excited to see her, and they spoke about this and this and this. But as soon as she mentioned the victim, he cubed right in front of her. And for the first time in her life, she was face to face with the BTK strangler. As soon as she just mentioned a victim, then he changed like that. Do you remember he was sitting at home reading the newspaper, and he was reading a letter in the paper from the BTK strangler, and his wife was reading that letter over his shoulder and said, "Ha, that's so funny, you make the same spelling mistake in this word like the BTK." And he was like, whoa. I think if she had asked him one more question, he could have changed right in front of her, and she would have been in serious trouble. That's a very scary thought. I know they had been married for more than 25 years, and he never hurt her physically. But she didn't mention anything about the BTK towards him until that spelling mistake in the newspaper. And he said himself, when she pointed out about the spelling mistake in the paper, he was like, whoa. And I actually heard one point that he said that he thought he had to kill her. But she let it go and didn't talk anymore about it, so he let her go. Can you imagine being the wife hearing that after? Wow. So I definitely think it was a close call. If she had pushed him just a little bit more about anything regarding to the BTK, I can't even think about what he would have done. It was his wife. And I don't know. Do you think he could control the cubing? Because it seemed like when Carrie mentioned a victim in the prison, He didn't have to change into the BTK, but he did. And he never did that in front of his daughter before. So in that moment when Carrie was in the prison, to me it seemed like he couldn't control himself. Like he just changed as soon as she mentioned the victim. That could have happened as well when his wife said, you made the same spelling mistake as the BTK. Do you think that if she had pushed him a bit more, that he would have cubed into the BTK right in front of his wife? It's a very scary thought. Oh my god. And now we have these two pictures that I want to talk to you about. I'm looking at them while I'm explaining this. That's why I'm looking the other way. But it's these pictures that I'm talking about. I really don't understand how he got up there. All the other pictures he took, I can completely see him doing it. And I can see how he did it. But these two pictures, they don't make sense to me at all. Because I think the first picture he took is the one with all the black bondage things on his legs and the plastic bag over his head. So he would have to tie up his legs first. Then he would have to jump over to that white rope hanging from the tree. Put his body inside that loop thing and so it's really tight, and then put a plastic bag over his head and then tie his arms behind his back. And then what? You can see his hands are tied. So when he took the picture, he had the remote for the camera in his hand. It was like a cable going from the camera and then with a squeezing thing so you can take your own picture. He has that in his hand. So he takes the picture of him hanging there with a plastic bag over his head and the bondage things on his legs. And when he's done, he unties his own hands, removes the plastic bag. But how does he get out of that rope? If he's hanging there with his entire body weight, that rope around his chest would have been super tight. How did he get it off? And it looks like he's hanging I don't know, like half a meter from the ground. It could be the angle of the picture. Maybe if he stretches his legs that he can stand up, I don't know. But to me, it just looks like he's really hanging. So I'm just thinking, how would he get that rope off? And then, when he gets it off somehow, he would take off the black bondage things from his legs, remove the plastic bag, take the shorts off, but his ankles are still tied, so he would have to jump back to that white rope hanging from the tree, climb inside again, and it would be super tight again across his chest, put brown pantyhose and the mask on, and hang there again. Can you explain to me how he got up there by himself? I know he said he did everything by himself, and I'm sure he did. But I don't see how he can do this by himself. I really don't. Unless, like I said, unless he's stretching his legs and then would be standing on the ground. It just doesn't look like that. It really looks like he's hanging like half a meter up or something. I don't know. So now I want to talk to you about Anna Williams, the 11th victim that got away. He became completely obsessed with her because she got away from him. He broke into her house where she was staying with her granddaughter, and He was sitting there waiting for her for hours. She had been to a class of line dancing. And after that, she went to visit her daughter. And her granddaughter, I think I remember correctly if I say that she had an extra shift at her job. So they didn't come home, neither of them, until very late. He already cut the phone line, but he lost his patience. And he left there with some of her jewelry, some of her clothes, and scarves. And he actually forgot his bindings. He left his bondage things, some clothes and ropes, and what looks like a camera. That's very strange. But anyway, I found this picture, and like I said earlier, he liked to recreate his crime scenes. But victim number 11 got away. But he sent her a package a few weeks later where he returned some of her items with a picture of what he would have done to her. And the headline said, "Oh, Anna, why didn't you appear?" Can you imagine? Oh my God. And then I found this picture. And the picture he sent to her is a victim that's standing up. Her hands are tied behind her back. And I found this picture. And he has a scarf over his shoulder. And he has a scarf on his head. Could that have been a picture to recreate the crime scene that never happened? He could be wearing her scarf on the head and over the shoulders, fantasizing about what he would have done to her. And if you look at the right side of the picture, there's like I don't know what it's called. It's a wooden stick with a square thing on the top. Look at the picture on it. It looks like one of his drawings. And there's a picture of a girl as well. Is that one of his victims? I've been zooming and zooming and zooming. It definitely looks like one of his drawings. And on the top of the drawing, you can see the letter A. Could that be for Anna? And he made a drawing of where he was gonna take her. Because maybe it's my imagination playing games with me. But it looks like, to me, it looks like a drawing of a farmhouse. And there's a photo of a woman in the left corner. And in the right corner is a black area. I don't know. But the more I zoom, it definitely looks like one of his drawings. So did he put that drawing up there while binding himself, recreating a crime scene in his mind because it never happened? It was said, because Anna Williams, she got away. He got completely obsessed with her because he didn't get her. Then there's a picture I want to talk to you about, is this one. He drew a picture of a girl that was completely bound, lying in a homemade, I don't know, it looks like a coffin, with a glass window above her face. But if you look at the picture, there's an actual drawing of the coffin closed on top of the picture. The lower picture, there's a woman lying inside it with something connected to it, but I can't tell if it's some kind of electric device or if it's oxygen. And that made me think of the photo where he buried himself. If you look at that picture, it looks like he connected oxygen or something to himself. And he liked to recreate his crime scenes on himself. So I'm thinking, I'm looking at the picture right now. Do you think he went through with that homemade coffin with the window and connected some electric or oxygen? He could have buried her in a shallow grave. So anytime he wanted to go visit her, he could, and he would just clean the dust off that window and he would be able to see her inside. If he connected oxygen, he could have been keeping her alive, torturing her inside. I don't know. When I look at the picture of himself where he buried himself, that's also like a shallow grave where he connected some mask, oxygen or something to himself. Could this have been the crime scene that he recreated on himself? What do you think? Do you think it's related? I don't know, but it's very creepy. It's scary. Very scary and creepy as well. And there is some writing on the picture, but I can't really make out what it says. But being buried in a coffin with a window, someone coming to visit you sometimes, just looking at you inside that coffin, that's, wow, very, very scary. Then I want to talk to you about one of the cold case victims. Her name was Shauna Garber. And Carrie said herself she don't believe that she's one of Dennis Rader's victims because he did home invasions and he never raped his victims. Shauna Garber, she was bound, raped, and strangled. And I'm thinking this happened in 1990, and it's true. He never raped his victims, but he never stabbed anyone as well, except for Catherine Bright. He stabbed a victim once and found out that he didn't like that, so he never ever did it again. So is it possible that he raped one victim and found out that he definitely didn't like that and never did it again? I don't think you can rule her out as a BTK victim because there was two of his victims that he did go to their home, but he took them out of the house. One of them was taken to the church where he took pictures of her. And the other one, he left her outside under a bridge. So we don't know, but the pattern of Shauna's murder, strangled and bound in different bindings, it sure does sound like the BTK to me. But we don't know, and he's still innocent in these cold cases until proven otherwise. But I don't think you can rule him out because he didn't rape his victims. But he did say to the Osage County Sheriff that he fantasized about kidnapping a girl from a laundromat. So he was changing. So this last thing that I want to talk about, before I say anything, I want to make perfectly clear that I'm not blaming Dennis Rader for this. I just noticed some similarities that made me think. And I'm not even going to share what I'm thinking. I'm just going to show you the similarities, and you can think what you want. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to blame anyone. I just hear me out and look at these pictures. Do you remember JonBenet Ramsey? Yep, JonBenet Ramsey. I don't know if Dennis Rader was ever in Colorado. It could also be a copycat, because I found one of his drawings, whereas a very young girl, it looks like a very young girl, that's bound with her arms above her head. And if you look at the picture of JonBenet Ramsey, she was found bound with her hands above her head. And if you look at the knots on her bindings and compare them to the bindings that was made by the BTK strangler, they look very similar. And then I looked at JonBenet's autopsy pictures, and she had a huge fracture on the right side of her skull. And I'm not blaming him, I'm just saying he likes to recreate his crime scene, draw them, pose himself like his victims. And then I found a picture that he drew of himself, of his face and the top of his head, and he drew a fracture on the right side of his head. Then I found the picture that he had sent to Anna Williams, where he's making like a poem about her and what he would have done to her. And he actually mentions a garrote. If you look at JonBenet Ramsey's crime scene, this person used a garrote to strangle her. She was strangled and bound. And this person who did this used a garrote. He's mentioning a garrote in his poem to Anna Williams. I don't know. You can think what you want. And like I said, I'm not blaming him for JonBenet Ramsey's murder. I don't want you to think that, because I'm not. It could be a complete coincidence. It could be a copycat. I'm not saying he did this. I don't even know if he have ever been in Colorado. I just think the similarities between her crime scene and his patterns in his murders are very eerie, very, I don't know. I just noticed it and I wanted to share it with you. Yeah. So that's it for today's video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know in the comment section down below what you think. Do you think these cold cases are going to be solved? I believe they will. And I hope and pray that all the victims' families, they're going to be able to get the answers that they're looking for, so they can get some peace and some closure. So until the next one, take care and stay safe. Bye!